get started? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. My name is Sean. I'm a librarian here at the John Steinbeck Library. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be having our Sands and Tides, planning the D-Day from a library. And we have a very special guest today. We have Ruth Andresen, who was very involved with geology research and the Library of Congress. So we're going to start just a little bit about Ruth before we start asking her some questions and letting her tell her magnificent stories. So Ruth Andresen is a Salinas native and a research geologist with a notable history of engagement in the community. She has been active in the community organization of all sorts, including the Salinas Women's Club, and was appointed to the first board of the Coastal Commission of the Central Coast. She has served for 43 years on the Monterey County Board of Education, and there is a school in town named in her honor. In the 1960s, she helped rouse the community to action when there was a plan to make the Monterey Bay an oil tanker load-off site. Thank goodness for Ruth, as it is only too easy to imagine the impact that would have on what it would have, which is what we now call our National Marine Sanctuary. She currently serves on the Historical Resource Board, the Historic Harvey House Board, among other things. So please join me in welcoming Ruth Andresen. Good afternoon, Ruth. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a 30 to 40 minute talk with Ruth about her time in the Military Geology Unit during World War II, her time as a geologist in 1942, and then we'll open it up to some questions and some more stories. You ready to begin?
Yeah.
All right. So let's start off. Where did you grow up?
Actually, my first 17 years were spent in Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Also, what brought you out to Salinas?
I didn't end up in Salinas originally because I came to California to go to Stanford. And that once I came to California, academically, I decided to stay here socially because I liked the climate so much. But World War II interfered, and after I graduated, I it was before I graduated, we had December 7th, which was Pearl Harbor, and that changed all the direction that I had ever planned. The plans you make because you think your life is stable are not the plans that you ultimately live with. And that's what happened to me. I got up Sunday morning, December 7th. I was very sure I knew what my world was going to be. I had a guaranteed job waiting for me. It was a very good job in Venezuela as soon as I graduated, which was going to be the end of that year. In 1942, I would have graduated in June 1942, and I would have gone straight to Venezuela, worked for a magnificent oil company, and my life was on a fine pattern. But by 8 o'clock on that Sunday morning at Pearl Harbor, my life changed completely. I didn't go any of the places that I planned to go. Instead, I ended up in Washington, D.C.
So what was that Sunday like, December 7th?
Well, December 7th was a total catastrophe because everyone was in shock because of the news. We didn't believe the news at first. We thought it was a play that had been put on the radio until we started hearing more and more reports. We were listening to the radio, of course. The radio was a major form of communication in that day and age. And finally, when it dawned on us that our world as we knew it had changed completely and it would never be the same again. So immediately everybody made plans to go in different directions. And the first thing that happened was that the chancellor of the school said, whatever you do, finish your degree. Finish what you're doing. Talk to your advisors, get yourself organized in your academics, and then decide what you're going to do with your lives. So pretty much that's what we do. Remember, at that time, the draft was already in action, and young people were being drafted, and that was the age and stage, that was the age group that was particularly targeted. So anyway, I took my direction and decided what I wanted to be as a geologist, and the only place I knew that was going to hire me in that particular time would be the United States Geological Survey. And the Geological Survey was part of the United States government and founded in 1897. And its mission was to map and to study all the surface of the United States, plus what was above the ground as well as what was below the ground. That included mines, it included mountains, it included glaciers, volcanoes. Anything that you have came under the auspices of the Geological Survey. So that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to do something that would protect my country and that would be part of the war effort. So Washington, D.C. was where I had to go.
So if you don't mind me asking, why geology?
Well, my uncle was my guardian, and he was a geologist. And to me, it was a way of life. What else was there other than a geologist was his chosen way of life. And I was brought up to collect fossils and rocks from the time I could walk. That was the most interesting thing to me. So it was perfectly natural that I would be a geologist. However, when I got to Stanford, I realized what an unusual occupation it was for a woman, because I was the only one in my class. Which made it, and in the class ahead of me, there was only one woman. There was, however, a much older woman. She was 3 years older. She was in graduate school. So it proved that you could survive your undergraduate years, and you could make it to graduate, and you could become a professional geologist if you worked at it. So I applied myself to the U.S. Geological Survey with the announcement, the diploma with wet ink in one hand, and all of my affidavits in the other hand, and I want a job, I want to be a geologist. Well, women were questionable. He was kind enough to say at the USGS, he said, yes, well, we are hiring with the war shortage, you know, and he emphasized there's a shortage. In other words, well, you'll do if we can't find anybody else. So he said, now, as I said, I had a diploma. I brought along my grades along just to be sure that he understood that the diploma was mine, not anybody else's. So I wanted to really impress him. So he said, well, we're not hiring right now because we have to have FBI clearance, but I'll give you a letter of recommendation. You get your FBI clearance, and then you come back and we'll talk. So, well, I was 21, and there really wasn't much in my history that the FBI could challenge at that point. So I got my clearance, then I came back in 2 days, and I said, now, here's my clearance, here's my diploma, and here's my affidavits. Can I have a job? Well, he said, now, we have to do, there's a few questions we'd like to have you answer. So I said, okay. He said, come tomorrow at 8:30. Tomorrow at 8:30, I arrived. Now by this time, this was July, in Washington, D.C. No air conditioning, lots of open windows, hot, muggy air, sweaty, damp, flies coming in and out. If you've been in the South in July, in the middle of July, with not a breath of air stirring, you'll know what the day was like. So he said, now, here's some questions we'd like you to answer. So he hands me this stack of papers. It looked like a whole Encyclopedia Britannica. And he said, take your time. There's no problem. Just take your time. I sat there the whole day. And you know what the questions were? Subject area academic questions on geology. What he was doing was testing what I had learned for 4 years in school. I did diagrams, I worked problems, I answered questions that whole miserable hot day. So I handed in my paper, and once again went back, and I said, now can I have my job? And he said, yes, we're hiring. Well, so we can find a position for you. We do have a geology job for you, but it won't be here. You'll have to be at the Library of Congress. Well, at that point, I really didn't know much about the Library of Congress. I knew it was a big building, but it was, that was about as much as I knew about it. But the Library of Congress is not for congressmen to check books out. The Library of Congress is the largest library in the world. It has 60 million books. That's a lot of books. And it's housed in 3 separate buildings. But the largest building, which is perfectly beautiful, is the building that was built in 1867. It's called it was built I'm losing my track here. It's named the Thomas Jefferson Building. And the original library accumulation was from Thomas Jefferson's library himself. Because the first library in Philadelphia had been burned down by the British in the War of 1812, they built the second library in Washington, D.C., and bought Thomas Jefferson's library for $7,000. And that was the start of the Library of Congress. So at the Library of Congress, I was given a small office in the newest building that was built in 1939. And that building had, it was put to temporary use, really. It wasn't meant to be used permanently in an office building, but it was for temporary wartime use. Offices had been built along the corridors. Instead of having stacks and rows of books, they simply made small offices. So I had a glass-walled office with a glass door. I could take books into the little office, but anybody walking up and down the corridor could see what kind of use I was making of that book. You have today, as of then, you have full inspection as you go into the Library of Congress because no one can check a book out other than a very high-ranking member of Congress or the staff person. Nowadays, there are 4,000 employees just running the library. At that time, because it was a wartime, it was like a beehive because the different agencies were there trying to access the information that was available that would help with the war gathering the wartime information. And excuse me. Good. Time out. You can ask me a question.
Okay, so, yes. So I was curious, with your office in the Library of Congress, were you just limited to Congress's main building? Were you just limited to the geology section? How did it work with you, your area?
It was marvelous, just marvelous. I'm thoroughly enjoying this talk. I've waited 75 years for somebody to say, what did you do during the war? Nobody ever asked.
Just to clarify, you were part of the Military Geology Unit, right?
Yes.
Which was part of the USGS?
Yes.
Okay.
I skipped that part. The Military Geology Unit, I should have explained, that was the part that I was hired for. And that was the part, that's why I had to have the clearance from the FBI. It was part of the Army, but not in uniform. But purpose of the Military Geology Unit was to do pre-invasion planning for the war effort, gather all the information that could be known in what's known as terrain studies. Terrain studies would be put together in folios prepared by separate little groups of people within the Military Geology Unit. They were all scientists in some phase of earth sciences. And the folios were prepared, and then they were taken to the Army Joint Commands and used for information in preparing the land invasions. The work was quite specific, and it was the real challenge was getting the information, because think of what we had to work with. There's a good display up there. We had no computer, no television. Most telephones were attached to the wall, except they did have battery-operated telephones for use in the field. The materials that for reproducing copy, we didn't have anything like a Xerox. We had no calculators. The only thing we had for communication was a typewriter, and that used carbons. We had to be very careful with the carbons because they had to be destroyed. That would be a very weak link in information gathering by an adverse group of anybody that was concerned. The folios were the first thing that we did with a folio was to use a map for placement. And interestingly enough, our favorite maps that we worked with were the National Geographic maps because of their clarity. Also, remember, the United States was not a linguistic country. We did not teach our children other languages other than English. And so a National Geographic map in English with the clarity of printing was a marvelous tool. And we know Dwight Eisenhower started the invasion with his National Geographic maps folded into his jacket with it. So it was the other maps that were so important to us were the Michelin maps. And they were the old, published by the Baedeker German company. And they were magnificent in their detail, in their intricacy of location. But they were miserable to read because the print was so small and it was in German. And the German alphabet is not comparable to the United States alphabet. So as a beginner, you would have the map. Someplace you had a magnifying glass, and then over here you had a dictionary. So that's the way you were doing your map work at the beginning. We became very sophisticated later on with of how we handle our material. And believe me, the Encyclopedia Britannica was the other great tool. So let me just walk you through what the process was. Now, I would get, as the, I was a glorified gopher. And technically, I was classified as a geological bibliographer, and that sounds great, but honestly, it was a gopher. So I would get requests for information for example, how high is the tide in a certain location at the third week in the month, if it's June. So then you would go back and you would start, first of all, you would try and get a pilot that went along covered the coastline, and that would be the book that would access a full description of those coastlines, and that's, you would pinpoint it there. Or if you were trying to find material on, for example, if you want to find material on what a river, what kind of banks the river had, because if the request was, are you going to have to ford it with men? Are you going to use tanks? Are you going to put a bridge across this river? So you would have to find a full description of the river. So what books would you use for that? Here again, you would start finding first to find the river. Then if you could find a location close to the river, for example, the city, if you could find a learned society that was in that city, or a university that was located in the city, then you had an access. You could track to that university, or you could track to any of the learned societies in that whole countryside. You see what it was like? It was tracking from one reference to the next reference to the next reference in order to find the answers. So originally at when the Military Geology Unit started, there were 3 bibliographers. I was the first hire, and then there 2 more came, and so we divided up the issues. Sometimes if one of us couldn't find the answer, then the other one would dig in, take another route and get the answer that way. The trail was unbelievable, and there's a very interesting display up there regarding the tools that were used. And if you go back and look at those, it's really amazing that we did accomplish as much as we could accomplish in that period of time. 75 years ago was really not advanced at all in communications. Salinas, remember, still had a party line. You could pick up the telephone and catch up on all the local gossip. If you just kept the telephone up, I mean, as long as they didn't know you were listening, you didn't. So, can you imagine we went from a party line in the city to a world-involved war with timeout.
Well, speaking from coming from Salinas to Washington, what was life like in DC, besides it being hot and humid and buggy? What was it like during World War II in Washington, D.C.?
It was, Washington, D.C. was a beehive, full of angry bees. Everybody, because one thing that was happening is that we were working very long hours. Another thing that was happening is that there was gas rationing. So everybody used the bus or they carpooled. And housing was worse then than it is now. For example, I lived in Arlington, Virginia, and I had an hour and 45-minute commute to get into the Department of the Interior, where the Military Geology Unit was. And then when I had to go to the Library of Congress, it was another bus trip. So it was a question of everybody running around like a collection of angry bees in all different directions. Fortunately, we had access to cafeterias. All the federal buildings had cafeterias. So you didn't have time out for grocery shopping and food. You could eat in a government cafeteria and that saved a lot of time but it was very crowded, and there were so many shortages of things that people were very good humored, though, because we were all in the same boat. Everybody was comforted with a can of Spam.
So you commuted back and forth on a train, and you got to work at the Library of Congress.
Yeah.
That is definitely incredible. Well, you talked about your research for the war, and how you got assignments. What were some of the places that you were assigned? I'm sure you can talk about it now, but...
Well, first of all, let me give you a thumbnail terrain study, because the terrain studies is what we were doing. Terrain is what something looks like. It's the surface of the land, what it looks like. So I'm going to give you a thumbnail study of Salinas in 5 minutes. Okay. Salinas is a floodplain, an antique floodplain. The river meandered throughout the history of time, and it made a flat floodplain, which is bounded by the Coast Ranges on one side and by the Gavilan Mountains on the other side. The river is an upside-down river because the water-bearing aquifers are not at the surface, and the water wells in the different parts of Salinas all have a different level of hardness. If you live in one part of town, you have one level of hardness. If you live in a different part of town, the same way with soils. The soils are different all over Salinas because this was a floodplain and the river wandered. We live also in a rain shadow because most of our rain falls on the Coast Ranges and falls back into the ocean, so that we have almost an arid condition usually in Salinas because of our lack of water. That, in essence, is a terrain study. But if you were going to put hundreds of men into a terrain, you'd have to know a lot more than that. You'd have to know how steep the mountains were. You'd have to know where the well was that you could drill. You'd have to know also about fording. When did the river flood? There's a vast difference between finding something in a book and the application of it, of the way that people live there. So terrain studies could be intensely complicated in what the subject was to be, in what the invasion plans were to be. The depth of research is what I'm trying to say. So all those things had to be dug out of maps, books, encyclopedias, any kind of academic reports that had been made. Of course, the worst problem that we had when we think about we were going into France, and originally